When firefighters and police arrived at the scene, everyone was not only surprised by the tragedy of the accident, but also shocked by the unprecedented nature of the accident. It was the subsequent rescue that completely threw everyone into the abyss of despair. This was the molasses disaster that occurred in Boston, USA on January 15, 1919. Yes, it was a catastrophe caused by molasses. This serious accident ultimately killed 21 people and injured more than 150 people. It has become a black history that cannot be erased in Boston. The cause of the matter has to start with the First World War. During the war, 80% of U.S. molasses capacity was used to produce industrial alcohol. The purpose is to make weapons such as explosives. As the needs of the war became increasingly huge, in 1917, the American Industrial Ethanol Company acquired the Boston Molasses Company to continue to increase production capacity and produce ethanol from molasses. At the same time, it also built a huge steel mill in the residential area to the north. Manufacturing storage tanks. After the war, the United States, which had gained huge war benefits, still had an increasing demand for alcohol in various industries. There is another important factor. No one is involved in the business of losing money, and beheadings are everywhere in the streets. At the time, the United States was under strict prohibition, and the law was enacted through a constitutional amendment. It can be seen how severe it is. As a result, molasses companies could covertly dabble in the grey industry of moonshine, join forces with various underground organizations and gangs to sell alcohol into the black market. All that's left is to rest and prepare to count the money. In this way, the company produced more and more molasses and produced a huge amount of spare molasses. Just store this molasses in this huge jar. Everyone already knows by now that the cause of this disaster is the Sugar Bowl, but the Sugar Bowl has gone through many years of war without any accidents. Why did it suddenly become so deadly at this time? Winter temperatures in Boston often fall below freezing, and it was very cold in the days leading up to the accident. However, on January 15, 1919, there was a warm sun in the early morning, and the temperature even rose to 4 degrees Celsius compared with the same period in previous years. This temperature is really abnormal. It is precisely this temperature that causes the molasses in the storage tank to begin fermenting and producing ethanol. At the same time, carbon dioxide is also produced, which is expanding carbon dioxide gas. After breaking through the limit of the storage tank, the sugar tank was constantly bursting. As a result, it was just past noon, around 1 p.m. An explosion that resounded through the air came from the manufacturing plant before people had time to react. At this time, don't worry about what happened to honey. First, the person was rolled up and thrown a few meters away by a strong air current. The carriage was blown into the air, and the windows were shattered instantly by the impact of the air waves. The building was shaken by the earthquake. People's ears are filled with noise and frightened howls. There was no time to react to what happened. What was terrible was that the answer and the real disaster followed. The 8.7 million liters of honey that broke the Sugar Bowl engulfed the surrounding area like a tsunami, a huge wave nearly 8 meters high, traveling at a speed of 56 kilometers per hour. It instantly wiped out everything around it. The office next to the Sugar Bowl was razed and buildings in the distance were damaged. The train derailed, sending people and horses everywhere covered in molasses. No chance to shout at all. Writer Stephen Pullo describes, waist-deep molasses covered the street, swirling and bubbling. There were things struggling everywhere, and it was impossible to tell whether they were animals or humans. Occasionally, someone struggled to get out of this sticky stuff, which showed that there was still life there. A large number of horses died like flies on flypaper. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. No matter what status people have, they all suffer the same fate. Boston Police, Red Cross, and National Guard responded to the scene. Unable to pinpoint the exact location of the victims, efforts were made to stir molasses in an attempt to find survivors. Some people were submerged too deeply, and the dense molasses made rescuers look at the victims helplessly, but they were unable to rescue them in time, helplessly watching the victims slowly suffocate to death. It is equivalent to making specimens of living people and fixing them in amber made of syrup. Some people heard their family calling their names, but they couldn't respond because the molasses blocked their throats. The rescue work continued into the night, and the low temperature at night caused the molasses to solidify, making the rescue work even more difficult. However, surrounding citizens rushed to the scene and quickly concluded the rescue work. This disaster destroyed streets, bridges, and residential buildings in the neighborhood, and the building damage alone reached $100 million. 21 people suffocated to death in the molasses, and animals such as cats, dogs, and horses on the streets were not spared either. Boston has become a city of death wrapped in sweetness, including the sores. Every corner of the street exudes the sweet atmosphere of molasses. It took the rescue team 4 days to clear a decent passage. It took more than 300 volunteers more than a month to use salt water and sand to initially clean this unrecognizable city. Through subsequent investigations, it was discovered that the company's molasses jars had cracks before the explosion. However, the company did not immediately check the quality. Instead, it painted the exterior of the molasses jars brown to cover up the cracks. In fact, local residents also know that this company's storage tanks have leakage problems. They even come here secretly to collect honey and take it home to secretly make wine. In addition, the honey tank was built in a hurry without safety inspection. Not only did it use steel that was not suitable for storing large amounts of liquid, but the steel was also very thin, making it impossible to handle 14,000 tons of molasses. Therefore, the normal temperature that day was actually just a trigger, and this disaster would come sooner or later. In the end, the court sentenced the American Industrial Ethanol Company to bear the main responsibility and compensated the victims $628,000, equivalent to $8 million today. The disaster-stricken area has now been built into a park, and there is still a commemorative plaque introducing the disaster at the entrance. It is said that the smell of molasses lasted for several years and never dissipated, telling the story of this rare disaster in a special way.